Welcome back. So when we last left off, we were on chapter 23, and Saphira and ERAGON were flying around together and they had a great time. So now they're headed for Tierm, a city. And I think it's to get the oil that the Razak were using. So now we're on chapter 24. A Song for the Road. The next day, while they were riding, ERAGON asked Brom, "What is the sea like?" "You must have heard it described before," said Brom. "Yes, but what is it really like?" Brom's eyes grew hazy, as if he looked upon some hidden scene. "The sea is emotion incarnate. It loves, hates, and weeps. It defies all attempts to capture it with words and rejects all shackles. No matter what you say about it, there is always that which you can't. Do you remember what I told you about how the elves came over the sea?" "Yes." "Though they live far from the coast, they retain a great fascination and passion for the ocean. The sound of crashing waves, the smell of salt air. It affects them deeply and has inspired many of their loveliest songs. This is one tale, the tales of love, if you want to hear it." "I would," said ERAGON, interested. Brom cleared his throat and said, "I will translate it from the ancient languages best I can. It won't be perfect, but perhaps it will give you an idea of how the original sounds." He pulled Snowfire to a stop and closed his eyes. He was silent for a while, then chanted softly. "O liquid temptress, 'neath the azure sky, your guided expanse calls me, calls me. For I would sail ever on, if I were not the elven maid, who calls me, calls me. She binds my heart with lily-white tie, never to be broken, save by the sea, ever to be torn twixt the trees and the waves." The words echoed hauntingly in ERAGON's head. "There is much more to that song, the Du Silbina Dantia. I have only recited one of its verses. It tells the sad tale of two lovers, Akalam and Nauda, who are separated by longing for the sea. The elves find great meaning in the story." "It's beautiful," said ERAGON simply. The spine was a faint outline on the horizon when they halted that evening. When they arrived at the spine's foothills, they turned and followed the mountains south. ERAGON was glad to be near the mountains again. They placed comforting boundaries on the world. 3 days later, they came to a wide road, rutted by wagon wheels. "This is the main road between the capital Urubine and Term," said Brom. "It's widely used as a favorite route for merchants. We have to be more cautious. This isn't the busiest time of year, but fewer people are bound to be using the road." Days passed as they continued to trek along the spine, searching for the mountain pass. ERAGON could not complain of boredom. When not learning the elven language, he was either learning how to care for Saphira or practicing magic. ERAGON also learned how to kill game with magic, which saved them time hunting. He would hold a small rock on his hand and shoot it at his prey. It was impossible to miss. The results of his efforts roasted over the fire each night. And after dinner, Brom and ERAGON would spar with swords, occasionally fists. The long days and strenuous work stripped ERAGON's body of excess fat. His arms became corded. His tanned skin rippled with lean muscles. "Everything about me is turning hard," he thought dryly. When he finally reached the pass, ERAGON saw that a river rushed out of it and cut across the road. "This is the Toark," explained Brom. "We'll follow it all the way to the sea." "How can we?" laughed ERAGON. "If it flows out of the spine in this direction, it won't end up in the ocean unless it doubles back on itself." Brom twisted a ring on his finger. "Because in the middle of the mountains lies the Wodark Lake. A river flows from each end of it, and both are called the Toark. We see the eastward one now. It runs to the south and winds along the bush until it joins Leona Lake. The other one goes to the sea. After 2 days in the spine, they came upon a rock ledge from which they could clearly see out of the mountains. Eragon noticed how the land flattened in the distance, and he groaned at the leagues they still had to traverse. Brom pointed. Down there to the north lies Term. It is an old city. Some say it's where the elves first landed in Ecclesia. Its citadel has never fallen, nor have its warriors ever been defeated. He spurred Snowfire forward and left the edge. It took them until noon the next day to descend through the foothills and arrive at the other side of the spine, where the forested land had quickly leveled out. Without the mountains to hide behind, Saphira flew close to the ground, using every hollow and dip in the land to conceal herself. Beyond the forest, they noticed a change. The countryside was covered with soft turf and heather that their feet sank into. Moss clung to every stone and branch and lined the streams that laced the grounds. Pools of mud pocketed the road, where horses had trampled the dirt. Before long, both Brom and Eragon were splattered with grime. "Why is everything green?" asked Eragon. "Don't they have winter here?" "Yes, but the season is mild. Mist and fog roll in from the sea and keep everything alive. Some find it to their liking, but to me it's dreary and depressing." When evening fell, they set up camp in the dreariest spot they could find. As they ate, Brom commented, "You should continue to ride Caddock until we reach Term. It's likely that we'll meet other travelers now that we're out of the spine, and it would be better if you were with me. An old man traveling alone will raise suspicion. With you at my side, no one will ask questions. Besides, I don't want to show up at a city and have someone who saw me on the trail wonder why you suddenly came." "Will we use our own names?" Eragon asked. Brom thought about it. "We won't be able to deceive Geod, but he already knows my name, and I think I trust him with yours. But to everyone else, I will be Neil, and you will be my nephew Evan. If our tongues slip and give us away, it probably won't make a difference, but I don't want our names in everyone's heads. People have an annoying habit of remembering things they shouldn't." Chapter 25. A Taste of Term. After 2 days of traveling north, towards the ocean, Saphira sighted Term. A heavy fog clung to the ground, obscuring Brom's and Eragon's sight until a breeze from the west blew the mist away. Eragon gaped as Term was suddenly revealed before them, nestled by the edge of the shimmering sea, where proud ships were docked with furled sails. The surf's dull thunder could be heard in the distance. The city was contained behind a white wall, 100 feet tall and 30 feet thick, with rows of rectangular arrow slits lining it and a walkway on top for soldiers and watchmen. The wall's smooth surface was broken by 2 iron portcullises, one facing the western sea, the other opening south to the road. Above the wall, and set against its northeastern section, rose a huge citadel built of giant stones and turrets. In the highest tower, a lighthouse lantern gleamed brilliantly. The castle was the only thing visible over the fortifications. Soldiers guarded the southern gate, but held their pikes carelessly. "This is our first test," said Brom. "Let's hope they haven't received reports from the Empire and won't detain us. Whatever happens, don't panic or act suspiciously." Eragon told Saphira, "You should land somewhere now and hide. We're going in." "Sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, again," she said sourly. "I know, but Brom and I have some advantages that most people don't. We'll be all right. If anything happens, I'm going to pin you to my back and never let you off." "I love you too." "Then I will bind you all the tighter." Eragon and Brom rode towards the gate, trying to appear casual. A yellow pennant bearing the outline of a roaring lion and an arm holding a lily blossom waved over the entrance. As they neared the wall, Eragon asked in amazement, "How big is this place?" "Larger than any city you've ever seen," said Brom. At the entrance to Term, the guards stood straighter and blocked the gate with their pikes. "What's your name?" asked one of them in a bored tone. I'm called Neil, said Brom in a wheezy voice, slouching to one side, an expression of happy idiocy on his face. And who's the other one? Asked the guard. Well, I was getting to that. This be my nephew Evan. He's Mister's boy, not a... The guard nodded impatiently. Yeah. And what's your business here? He's visiting an old friend, supplied Eragon, dropping his voice into a thick accent. I'm along to make sure he doesn't get lost, if you get me meanin'. He ain't as young as he used to be, had a bit too much sun when he was younger, touch of brain fever, you know. Brom bobbed his head pleasantly. Right, go on through, said the guard, waving his hand and dropping the pike. Just make sure he doesn't cause any trouble. Oh, he won't, promised Eragon. He urged Caddock forward, and they rode into Term. The cobblestone street clacked under the horses' hooves. Once they were away from the guards, Brom sat up and growled. Touch of brain fever, eh? I couldn't let you have all the fun, teased Eragon. Brom harumphed and looked away. The houses were grim and foreboding. Small, deep windows let in only sparse rays of sunlight. Narrow doors were recessed into buildings. The tops of roofs were flat, except for metal railings, and all were covered with slate shingles. Eragon noticed that the houses closest to Term's outer wall were no more than 1 story, but the buildings got progressively higher as they went in. Those next to the citadel were the highest of all, though insignificant compared to the fortress. This place looks ready for war, said Eragon. Brom nodded. Term has a history of being attacked by pirates, Urgles, and other enemies. It has long been the center of commerce. There will always be conflict when riches gather in such abundance. The people here have been forced to take extraordinary measures to keep themselves from being overrun. It also helps that Galbatorix gives them soldiers to defend their city. Why are some houses higher than others? Look at the citadel, said Brom, pointing. It has an unobstructed view of Term. If the outer wall were breached, archers would be posted on all roofs, because the houses in front by the outer wall are lower. The men farther back could shoot over them without fear of hitting their comrades. Also, if the enemy were to capture those houses and put their own archers on them, it would be an easy matter to shoot them down. I've never seen a city planned like this, said Eragon in wonder. Yes, but it was only done after Term was nearly burnt down by a pirate raid, commented Brom. As they continued up the street, people gave them searching looks, but there was not an undue amount of interest. Compared to our perception at Duret, we've been welcomed with open arms. Perhaps Term has escaped unnoticed by Urgles, thought Eragon. He changed his opinion when a large man shouldered past them, a sword hanging from his waist. There were other, subtler signs of adverse times. No children played in the streets, people bore hard expressions, and many houses were deserted, with weeds growing from cracks in the stone-covered yards. Looks like they've had trouble, said Eragon. Same as everywhere else, said Brom grimly. We have to find Geode. They led their horses across the street to the tavern and tied them to the hitching post. The green chestnut. Wonderful, muttered Brom. Looking at the battered sign above them, he and Eragon entered the building. The dingy room felt unsafe. The fire smothered in the fireplace, yet no one bothered to throw more wood on it. A few lonely people in the corners nursed their drinks with sullen expressions. A man, missing 2 fingers, sat at a far table, eyeing his twitching stumps. The bartender had a cynical twist to his lips and held a glass in his hand that he kept polishing, even though it was broken. Brom leaned against the bar and said, Do you know where we can find a man called Geode? Eragon stood at his side, fiddling with the tip of his bow by his waist. It was slung across his back, but right then he wished it was in his hands. The bartender said in an overly loud voice, Now, why would I know something like that? Do you think I keep track of this mangy louts in this forsaken place? Eragon winced as all eyes turned towards them. Brom kept talking smoothly. Could you be enticed to remember? He slid some coins into the bar. The man brightened and put his glass down. "Could be," he replied, lowering his voice, "but my memory takes a great deal of prodding." Brom's face soured, and he slid more coins into the bar. The bartender sucked on one side of his cheek, undecidedly. "All right," he said finally, and reached for the coins. Before he touched them, the man that missed 2 fingers called out from his table. "Gareth, what in the blazes do you think you're doing? Anyone on the street could tell him where Geod lives. What are you charging them for?" Brom swept the coins back into his purse. Gareth shot a venomous look at the man at the table, then turned back to them and picked up the glass again. Brom went to the stranger and said, "Thanks." "The name's Neil, and this is Evan." The man raised his mug to them. "Martin, and of course you met Gareth." His voice was deep and rough. Martin gestured at some empty chairs. "Go ahead and sit down. I don't mind." ERAGON took the chair and arranged it so his back was to the wall and he faced the door. Martin raised an eyebrow but made no comment. "You just saved me a few crowns," said Brom. "My pleasure. Can't blame Gareth, though. Business hasn't been doing so well lately." Martin scratched his chin. "Geod lives on the west side of town, right next to Angela, the herbalist. You got business with him?" "Sort." "Of a sort," said Brom. "Well, he won't be interested in buying anything. He just lost another ship a few days ago." Brom latched onto the news with interest. "What happened? It wasn't Urgel's, was it?" "No," said Martin. "They've left the area. No one's seen them in almost a year. It seems they've all gone south or east. But they aren't the problem. See, most of our business is through sea trade, as I'm sure you know. Well," he stopped to drink from his mug. "Starting several months ago, someone's been attacking our ships. It's not the usual piracy, because only ships carry goods if certain merchants are attacked. Geod's one of them. It's gotten so bad that no captain will accept those merchants' goods, which makes life difficult around here, especially because some of them run the largest shipping business in the Empire. They're being forced to send goods by land. It's driven costs painfully high, and their caravans don't always make it." "Do you have any idea who's responsible? There must be witnesses," said Brom. Martin shook his head. No one survives the attacks. Ships go out, then disappear, and never seen again." He leaned towards them and said in a confidential tone, "The sailors are saying it's magic." He nodded and winked, then leaned back. Brom seemed worried by his words. "What do you think?" Martin shrugged carelessly. "I don't know, and I don't think I will, unless I'm unfortunate enough to be caught by one of those captured ships." "Are you a sailor?" asked ERAGON. "No," snorted Martin. "Do I look like one? The captains hire me to defend their ships against pirates, and those thieving scum haven't been very active lately. Still, it's a good job." "But a dangerous one," said Brom. Martin shrugged again and downed the last of his beer. Brom and ERAGON took their leave and headed to the west side of the city. A nicer section of Tyr. The houses were clean, ornate, and large. The people in the streets wore expensive finery and walked with authority. ERAGON felt conspicuous and out of place. And that is the end of chapter 25. And I will read the next chapter at a later date.